And I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. We've got a great group here and we've got a great presentation. So Doris is going to pull me a ticket and we're going to do a door prize. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. Okay. Gotta be in your seat, Robin. Get over there. Or Bonnie. Oh, put her ticket. You didn't get a ticket either. Okay, we'll get you a ticket for the next one. We're going to be doing door prize drawings throughout the entire day. And every time the audience behaves themselves and does what I direct them to do, we'll do a door prize. How's that? Okay, so my first door prize is donated by the Commission on Aging, and it is a router, a computer router. So any of you that are looking for computer routers, the ticket number is, last four numbers is 401. 401. All righty, Ava. There, goes to Eva. She's walking up here. Okay. All right, there you go, Eva. All right. That little guy's mad he didn't win that. Hi, Gene. So again, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. This is Calaveras County's first participation in World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. And we're going to talk just a little bit about what that is in just a few moments. But I just want to take a minute to thank, first of all, our commissioners. If you sit on the Commission on Aging, could you please stand? I know I just had everybody sit, but if you're standing, if you're on the Commission on Aging, okay, these people, and there's a couple missing, but we'll be here in just a little bit. We sit on Commission on Aging for Calaveras County, and our main focus is to inform the supervisors of what we feel are important to senior issues. We meet the first Friday of every month at 10 o'clock. Robin, is it 10 o'clock? Is that what time we're meeting now? 10 o'clock. And right now we're currently meeting at the new Common Grounds office over here on East St. Charles Street. And it is a public meeting, so please feel free to attend if you have senior issues that you would like to be brought up. Some of our sponsors that made this possible today, Ace Hardware Center in Arnold, Assist Care Residential Care Facility, Calaveras Health and Human Services, Common Ground, Evetts Pass, Lumber and Hardware, Arnold Lions Club, Mark Twain Healthcare District, Mark Twain Medical Center, Sierra Pacific Industries, the Outhouse Collection, and I really want to apologize to Midnight Rose. Where's Midnight Rose? There they are over there. Give them a big hand. They got left off the agenda. Also, Gold Country Auto Body, and our new trash man. Is he here? Bertha, is Dave here? No? Okay. Cal Waste has a new owner, from what I understand, and they just came in as a sponsor on Friday. So we're very, very thankful. We wouldn't be able to do this without them. So those are our people. Also the booths. We want to talk about all the booth people here today, the exhibitors. We're all collaborative partners, and if you need any kind of information for senior services and it's not here, which I can't believe it would not be, then talk to somebody, talk to one of us, and we can direct you to where your issue is. So as you came in, you got a program. Everybody get a program? Okay, so we're going to start with an World Elder Abuse Awareness Day overview, and then we're going to have a presentation by Adult Protective Services, and then we're going to have a special recognition, and then we're going to have lunch, and all that's supposed to take place by 11:45, so I need to quit talking and get going. And then we're going to have our guest speaker, Patrick Arbor. Patrick is up here in the front. Who has heard Patrick before? Raise your hand. Look at this group. Look at this group. Are you a draw, Patrick, or what? And he's going to talk about staying healthy by staying connected. So all that's going to take place by 2. We'll be done. And then our booth exhibitors has been asked to stay set up until 2:30 so we can all look at their stuff afterwards. And again, thank you guys all for coming. So World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. My name is Kathy, and I do sit on the Commission on Aging. And as Elizabeth Taylor told all of her husbands, don't worry, I won't keep you long, okay? World Elder Abuse Awareness Day was launched, we're going to be doing this all day. It was launched June 15th, 2006. So everywhere, well not everywhere, I counted 176 events going on just in the United States today. So it is getting more and more popular. People are getting more and more aware of it. It was started by the International Network for Prevention of Elder Abuse and the World Health Organization. And they wanted to promote better understanding of neglect and abuse of elders. Many of our older adults still believe that elder abuse is a family issue. And I'm here to tell you it's not. Elder abuse is and I'm going to go through those, but you know, there's no more family issues. It's kind of like domestic violence. There's no more of that. And so we do what we can to knock it out. It also, the World Elder Abuse Awareness Day, it acts as a call to action for individuals, organizations, communities to get together and say, not in my neighborhood, basically. The World Elder Abuse website and all that kind of stuff that got it all together, they put out 10 topics that they would like discussed this year. This being our first here in Calaveras County, which we hope will be one of many. We have picked expand knowledge as our focus this year. So we just basically want to inform people, inform the community, what is elder abuse, what are some signs of it. There's a lot of regulations. There's Health and Human Service, or Health and, help me Elisa, Health and Welfare codes, Welfare and Institution codes. There's just a ton of things regarding elder abuse and what elder abuse is. But in a nutshell, it is the intentional or neglectful acts by a caregiver that or trusted individual that does not provide for this elder. And we're going to talk about what they can and can't provide. But here's the thing of it. Before you can be prosecuted for elder abuse, it must be willful. Okay? It must have happened because somebody was angry, somebody was vindictive, somebody was malicious, whatever, it has to be willful. So keep that in mind. Who's at risk? We're going to talk about a little bit of some of the people that you've probably heard of that have been abused. I have got 8 people in this room right now that within the last 3 weeks have called me and said, I think my mom's being abused financially. That's a lot. There's probably 70 people here, 60 or 6 of them, 8 of them, crazy. Women and older elders are especially vulnerable. Those with dementia, and if there's mental health or substance abuse factors involved, and those that are isolated. Now, our whole thing today with Patrick is going to be on staying healthy by staying connected. Isolation, as you will hear from Patrick, is one of the biggest factors to being abused, financially, physically, all of it. Financial abuse is one of the top abuses that goes on. And as you'll see from the next slide we'll talk about, it's called the crime of the 21st century. Some of the signs that a person is being abused financially is the lack of amenities that they could afford. I'm working with a gentleman right now that his sister-in-law came in for some other stuff and all of that, but here's a gentleman that will not buy Depends. Instead, he bought himself a large pair of rubber pants and he puts a towel in it. Okay, when you see things like that, when he can't afford it, those are the kinds of things that we're referring to. My favorite. Oh, well, she gave it to me. She said I could have the car. I saw a guy driving the other day in this beautiful Cadillac, and he looked like he was like 27. I'm like, oh, there goes Grandma's car. So, you know, just things like that. The caregiver has control of the money. A biggie, a biggie, a biggie. A vulnerable individual has signed their property over, but they do not have the capacity to do so. That's another huge one. You get a new caregiver in, the caregiver says, I need a bank account, I need a car, I need this, let me be on your checking account, and pretty soon before you know it, there's a lot of money gone. Psychological and emotional abuses. So again, some of the signs, and another one of the top in the category, unexplained or uncharacteristic changes in behavior. Your loved one, if they have a caregiver and they're being abused, they are not going to tell you. You've got to look for signs. They don't want to get in trouble, they don't want to go in a home, they don't want to be without another caregiver. There's 100 reasons why. We have Adult Protective Services here. Elise is here with Adult Protective Services, who's going to talk about some of the issues that they encounter out in the community from some of our people that are abused. Huge one, threats of institutionalization, which I already talked about, harm, demeaning or humiliating comments. Physical abuse, some of the signs is inadequately explained bruises, fractures, welts, burns. I mean, they're still burning people with cigarettes. Sores, cuts, welts. And you know, we can't always judge just because we see someone with this stuff out in the public. I was at a huge garage sale we did in our community this weekend, and this lady came in, and I tell you, my first thought was that she fell. That was my first thought. She was beat up everywhere. She was in a wheelchair, she had a caregiver with her, and then I started looking at her. I'm like, I wonder if somebody's beaten that lady. But what I did was I took the time to go and talk to her. I just started off with, hi, how are you, blah, 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 glad you came, blah, blah, blah. And I said, my gosh, what happened to your wrist? Because her wrist was also in a thing. She says, my skin is just so thin, everything I touch, it bruises, blah, 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 blah. And, you know, by interacting with the two of them, I could tell that the caregiver was very loving, really took care of this individual. So we can't always judge just because we see somebody like that. We need to find out the whole circumstances. And believe it or not, we've got some unexplained sexually transmitted diseases. That does happen. Neglect, lack of basic hygiene, inadequate food, lack of medicine. If you see somebody that doesn't have glasses and they really need them, and you know they can afford them, even if they can't afford them, we can get them glasses through Lions Clubs or other places. So why don't these people have that? Persons with dementia left unattended. One time I was doing a training, and it was a 5 days a week training, 8 hours a day training, and this individual that was taking the training her husband has dementia. And I said, well, where is he? Oh, well, he's at home. Alone? Well, yeah, I locked him in the house. So after class, I took her aside and I said, you know, we can't have you doing that. I mean, I might have to call somebody. What if he gets hurt? Oh, he won't touch a thing. He'll sit there till I get home. So then I asked her not to do that. So the next day she brought him and made him sit on the couch for 8 hours while she took her training. I finally, on the third day, said, don't come back. He needs you, or get him a caregiver or something, so that's just not acceptable. So, you know, that's a real biggie. House in disarray, inadequate facilities, untreated pressure sores. Everybody know what a pressure sore is? It's from being in bed for too long in one spot without being turned. The World Health Organization has defined elder abuse as a violation of human rights and a significant cause of illness, injury, loss of productivity, isolation, and despair. And again, Patrick will be touching on that. It's a hidden problem. The statistics all over the internet were real hard to narrow down. I found anywhere from 9 to 41, so I took the 23. So for every one case that is reported, 23 go unreported. Talk just a little bit more about financial abuse. It affects approximately 100,000 California seniors each year. 65% of whom are women, older women. 90% are family members. In my line of work, what I have seen, who do you think is the #1 family member perpetrator? Which child? A son, okay. #1 perpetrator that I've seen is grandchildren, grandson usually. They are the ones, that are, grandma trusts them. More than likely, grandma helped raise this first grandson, dear to our hearts. And they are usually the #1 abusers. And in 2009, $2.9 billion was taken regarding financial abuse. They're calling it again the crime of the 21st century, and these are some of the top scams. How many of you in here have a grandson? How many love him with your whole heart? And if he called in the middle of the night at 3 o'clock and said, "Grandma," and you said, "Oh, Johnny, what's the matter?" "Oh, yeah, Grandma, I'm in trouble." That's the grandparent scam. Be careful. In these scams, the best thing that I've found, #1 is hang up instantly. Because if you hang up, they'll quit calling you. The second thing is call somebody that you know and trust and ask them, "Hey, can you check this out?" The effects of elder abuse. Abused seniors are 3 times more likely than those that are subject to die quicker. They've lost trust in others. #1, if you're financially abused, especially through a scam, who's the first person you're not telling? Your family members. If somebody's stealing your money, they're not going to stand for it. They're going to more than likely give you a caregiver, put you in a home, make you come live with them, God forbid. And then, they just lose trust. They don't trust anybody. They don't tell anybody anything. Security, depression, feelings of shame and guilt, financial destitution. Becoming reliant on government safety net programs, which kills our older adults. This group of older adults that we have right now do not want government help. They have always done it on their own. They want to continue doing it on their own. So that just depresses them even further. And then most of the time they lose their house. Mandated reporters. Who in this room works with older adults? Okay, about half of you. How many of you are mandated reporters? Everybody that raised the hand the first time should have raised it the second time. Any capacity that you work with an older adult, you are a mandated reporter, except priests and confessionals. But go figure. Now, I'm going to be 60 this year, and I'm looking for this guy to start abusing me. And if he'll let me abuse him, that's even better. Please know that elder abuse can happen to anyone in any society of any group. There's no one that is immune to it. Everybody know the story of Mickey Rooney? Mickey Rooney, great star in the 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, maybe even to the 80s. Got older, and his son and grandson had him in a back room for years. Took all of his money, put him on tour at $10,000 a tour, an appearance. He didn't have the capacity to do tours. Kim, you remember when we did the other elder abuse conference, we tried to get him. They want $10,000, and he has dementia. So they just did so much abuse to him. Brooke Astor, everybody know who Brooke Astor is? Her husband started or built Manhattan. She had more money than God, probably more money than anybody else. Her son and grandson had her in a back room and stole $60 million from her. And she was hidden in a back room. Nobody could see her. Isolation is huge. If you have a neighbor that's an older adult and you don't see them anymore, why? They can at least walk outside and get some fresh air. So just question when people isolate them.
Where are all those grandchildren now? That took advantage of those?
So Brooke Astor's son recently died at 80-something, well, no, 80-something, and then the grandson is in prison. They both went to prison. Yeah, they both went to prison. One of the things I like to encourage people to do is please share this knowledge. I mean, it's great to be here and we're learning it and all of that, but if you've got a neighbor, friend, somebody that's vulnerable, be sure and take this knowledge back to them. Now, I want you to raise your hand if this woman doesn't remind you of your 4th grade teacher. First time I saw this picture, I was scared to death. Trust your instincts. Trust your instincts, but also know that you don't have to prove the abuse. That's up to the people that you call to investigate the abuse. And again, Alicia was going to talk about that a little bit more. If you don't know who to go to, call any of us here that you collected something from. Area 12, Resource Connection, Common Ground, even friends and neighbors, the banks, Kim and all the, everybody, the hospitals even. So I've got some reporting information up here. Calaveras Health and Human Services. If the facility is in a long-term care facility, then you would call the Ombudsman program. I got someone right here going through the Ombudsman program. And what they do is they investigate the abuse that happens in long-term care facilities, such as Mark Twain, Kit Carson, any of those other big facilities around here. I think Country Haven is over on there. And of course, if it's urgent or life-threatening. And I went faster than my notes, so you guys should be proud of me. So at this time, I'd like to ask Elisa to come up. Elisa is from Adult Protective Services. She's going to tell us a little bit about what they do. Elisa was raised here in the foster care system in Calaveras County. And what I love about her is that she went and got her education. She graduated from Bret Harte, she went to UOP, and then she went to National University, and then came back here to work with Child Protective Services in the foster care system. I think that deserves a round of applause.
Thank you, everyone. I'm very honored to be here today. Kathy went over a lot of the abuse categories that the elder population that we deal with. So what I'm going to break down today is actually what does Adult Protective Services do here in Calaveras County. We have a couple of programs. One is Adult Protective Services, which is we investigate abuse. We oftentimes in those cases, we will accompany out with law enforcement. We're not medical professionals either, so we do have a nurse that will go out with us as well if it comes to medical issues. So we work in determining what the abuse is. The other program that we have through our agency is called the In-Home Supportive Services. That program was designed to provide services to individuals to stay in their home with assistance. Our goal is to keep you in your home as long as possible. We have care providers through the In-Home Supportive Services program that will come out and assist in your day-to-day needs. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. The other programs that we do work is called the Representative Payee. As Kathy had stated, financial abuse is on the rise. I don't think there's a week that goes by in our agency that we receive reports on financial abuse. And she is right, typically it is somebody that is a relative, sadly. The Representative Payee program is sometimes people need assistance in paying their bills. They need someone to assist in writing their checks, keeping their budget, just someone to oversee their finances to make sure that they're not being taken advantage of, because there are numerous people who sadly take advantage of the elderly population. So we have that program available. Also, we have the program called Public Guardian. Is when an elderly person ends up at a time in their life that they don't have the capacity to be able to care for themselves, which it could be dementia, could be all different factors. Is the public guardian is where we work with the courts and county council to make sure that their needs are being met and that they're being overseen. So those are the main programs that our agency works with. Kathy talked pretty much about adult protective services and the abuse categories. One thing that I do want to discuss is that there's not a lot of funding for adult protective services. So what that means is that we have to be creative. We have to be resourceful. We cannot do our jobs without our community support. We are out in the field on these referrals that come in with law enforcement, with mental health. I mean, I will grab anybody that I possibly can to go out in the field with. Our senior peer ladies, are they here today? I see one. Hi. You know, they work hand in hand. I mean, they work with us, provide services, follow up with our elderly population. So we also work a lot with physicians, your placement facilities. Just because a person goes into convalescent care doesn't mean that's it, they're done. What it means is that they're getting them healthy to where they can also transition them back into their home. Oftentimes when they end up in convalescent care, it's kind of an alert to us that we need to check the home. We need to see what's happening. What did they come out of? Because as Kathy stated, you know, people are prideful. And you don't want to think it's your family that is taking advantage of you. You don't want to think those things. And sadly, oftentimes that's the case. So what we will do is go out, make sure the home is appropriate, make sure that no abuse is being found, and to where that person can go back and live in their own home as the way it's supposed to be. And with adult protective services, good news is elder abuse has never been the forefront in our community. We have new judges now, 2 new judges that were sworn in this year, and my director informed me a couple weeks ago that she had a meeting with our judge and he wants to work on an elder abuse court, which means that, I'm hoping, what it means is that the cases that we do substantiate for abuse are actually being prosecuted. A lot of the times they are not prosecuted, sadly. They're plea bargained out, or they're not even picked up to go for conviction. So hopefully with the new change and happening is that we will become that forefront and hopefully get some of these abuse cases prosecuted more. And you know, our local law enforcement, I have to say, is wonderful. I can call up anytime and say, hey, I need to go out on this certain call, and they're there for us. They go out with us on a lot of our cases because abuse is criminal, so they do need to be part of that. In regards to in-home supportive services, it's a program that allows individuals who are low income to be able to receive services to help them stay in their home, which is preparing meals, which is cleaning their home, taking them to and from doctor's appointments. There's a wide array of services that can be provided under the in-home supportive services program. We also have, if they don't meet the income threshold, we also work with private companies that we refer out, that people can also pay to get those services inside their homes as well. So currently, I believe as of last week, we had 373 people who were on in-home supportive services that we are keeping them in their homes, keeping them where they get to stay where they want to stay, which makes them more healthier, and not using convalescent or facilities. So pretty busy there. Public Guardian is the program that when a person gets to the point that they can no longer care for themselves, they don't have the capacity, we have to work with the physicians, we have to work with county council, we have to work with the courts. We have to go to court to prove that a person doesn't have the capacity. I think one of the hardest things when I transferred over from child welfare over to adult services was, there's kind of a different philosophy, is when a child is being abused, we could go in and we can remove and we could shelter and take care of that child. On the adult side, we don't get that. We have people that we know are being abused. We have people that we know are being taken advantage of, and they show that they have the capacity, and they still live in that abusive relationship. I can't change a person's rights because they're an adult. They get to make their own decisions, which it should be that way, but also too, there has to be a governing body to also provide that support and just that extra need for those individuals, because when you're living in abuse, you don't think it's abuse. So that was a hard thing to have. There's times that we've walked away in some of these cases that I was like, pit in my stomach. I'm gonna go on this crusade. My senior peer people know my crusades that I get onto, because the great thing is they're just as passionate as I am. So, but it is hard. It's hard to deal with those certain situations. Who we work, as I stated, there's not a lot of funding for APS services, but we rely so much on our community. Our library gave us free books all the time. My director and I were out there loading up the cars with their larger print books that they just donate to us. We're doing yard sales. We're out at the community centers. We work tirelessly with everybody in the community to provide services for our clients. Who we really have been working more closely with is our banks, our financial institutions, because financial abuse is in the forefront right now. Many individuals are being taken advantage of. It's amazing the scams and actually the brilliance that these individuals come up with to get into somebody's account. You think you're safe from just having your social security and a password. They are so far over my head. I mean, it's amazing of the abuse that they are able to do. We work a lot with Common Grounds. Yes. Oh, she's telling me I'm out of time. Okay, so we work closely with Common Grounds, mental health, because we have this medical diagnoses. We also work a lot with the fire department, Area 12, senior peer group, everybody that we actually rely upon to make sure that, we're doing the best that we can. So, all right, well, thank you, everyone.
So her question is there a specific age for elder abuse?
Under your institution's codes, it's 65 and older, but also, we also look for disabled adults. So, you can have a 25-year-old who's developmentally delayed that our agency would be responding on to. We get referrals that, they're 60 and we still go out.
It's always tough to follow a good speaker, especially with such important subjects. Kathy really had me going when she put up the picture of Elizabeth Taylor. Who can deny the beauty of Cleopatra? I don't care what age you're at. She's pretty timeless. But when she put up George Clooney, I don't know. That went south in a hurry. My name is Steve Kearney. I'm the supervisor for District 5 in Calaveras County, and I have the great fortune of being assigned to the Area 12 Agency on Aging. When I took the assignment, I thought, well, that'll be an easy one because I've got some pretty other very busy assignments. I won't have much to do. Boy, was I wrong. There is a lot to do. There's an awful lot of opportunity. One of the things we do as supervisors is we have the great pleasure of presenting some acknowledgments. I have been shirking the duty on purpose, and as my chair next to me, Cliff Edson, will tell you, he kept asking me to make them, but I purposely asked that I not do that because I was contacted a bit ago by Doris Toth, who's somewhere in the audience, and I want to thank her for doing that. She brought this acknowledgement to my attention, and she stuck with me till we got it done. So wherever she's at, thanks, Doris. She deserves a hand from us all, and I really appreciate it. The Board of Supervisors, in an acknowledgement that I had something to do with, and fortunately my friend Doris was looking over my shoulder when we did it, recognized World Elder Abuse Day, and I was really proud to present this as my first proclamation and acknowledgement. And if you bear with me, because I'm pretty close to being a senior citizen myself, I got to put my glasses on. I don't want to read the whole thing because I want to donate as much of my time to having a good time here today and also learning more about these subjects. But there's one part of this that I do want to read on this proclamation that was presented. And it says, whereas, according to the latest census, 28.3% of the county's population is age 60 and older, and the Health and Human Services Agency's Adult Protective Services has an average of 58 active APS cases. That's a lot, and you're not looking at a huge crew to do that. I thank them, and I hand this off to him, wherever Phil Sherwood's out in the audience, I thank him also. I appreciate what you do, and it was really an honor to present this.
So my wonderful staff, this is Aditra Miller, this is Steve Agino, Michelle Brown, and Eva Macias.
This is a great and important group of people, and that being said, this is Chair Cliff Edson. He's your county supervisor from District 1, and he's got some real important things to do.
This is the fun stuff right here. I get to recognize and present certificates to these wonderful people. Kathy set this up. You guys, we recognize you for your very important duties in helping our elderly folks, and you see it everywhere. Don't really know what to do with it. It's nice to know that there's folks like you that are so dedicated to be able to step forward and take care of that. These are gift certificates from Pickle Patch. Kind of funny, huh? Country Cliffs, Pickle Patch, but that's okay. We love the Pickle Patch too. So Steve Organo, thank you very much. Alyssa, thank you very much. Michelle, thank you, Michelle. Thank you so much. Guys, enjoy. You guys gonna all eat together? Aditra and Miller? Okay, Aditra. Thank you very much. And Eva? Eva, right? Eva? Okay, thank you very much, Eva. Thank you. All right. Thank you for your dedicated service. We really appreciate it.
Elise, I want you to know that Adult Protective Services is not only being recognized at the county level, but also at the state level. So Dana is here to do that.
Hi,
Hi.
I'm Dana. I'm with Senator Berryhill and Assemblyman Bigelow, and we have a legislative resolution for you as well. Let me just read this quickly. Will you help me a moment? Thanks. This is a certificate of recognition to the Calaveras County Adult Protective Services Agency. And it says, we honor your contributions towards keeping our seniors safe and healthy. Your service towards helping our friends and neighbors continue to live and be an integral part of Calaveras County is honored and appreciated, and it is signed by my bosses, Senator Berryhill and Assemblyman Bigelow.
Wow, thank you very much. Thank you.
Lisa.
I just wanted to add real quick, I think that something that I think you said today, if the banks can get involved, I know people, you know, you keep accounting of your finances, we're all different, and your banker knows how you do that. If something's out of order, they know that, and there's someone that can step in and say, hey, how are you doing? And people are willing to, they have that bond and that trust, even if it's in the bank once a week or whenever. So I would encourage the banks, because unfortunately, we have a lot of younger people that take advantage of older folks, and it's really sad to see, and we want to do everything that we can do to prevent that. So, but thank you.
Thank you.
I have a question for you.
Yes.
Are you a firstborn grandson?
I am the oldest grandchild on 3 sides. I'm the oldest great-grandchild. Yeah. And I'll tell you what, somebody, my dad, I'm not tooting my horn, my dad's, you know, I'm really proud of both my kids. They both left the home at 18. They've taken care of themselves for years and years, and I wish more people did that.
Thank you, Dana. Appreciate it. All right. Again, it knows no economic boundaries, so. Okay, who's hungry? Patrick gives presentations locally and nationally on aging issues. I have seen Patrick from San Francisco to Washington, D.C., and a few places in between, so he is just one of the best speakers I hear. He was a 2013 national recipient of the Mental Health and Aging Award presented by the American Society on Aging. He was also a silver medalist by the Regional Jefferson Award Committee in January for his work in public service. And Patrick, you have been with the Institute on Aging since '73.
With them since 1997.
Oh, that's right. That's when they encompassed the friendship line. Okay, so.
Separate nonprofit.
So it is my pleasure to introduce my friend, Patrick Arbor. I am very friendly with this guy, and so I always forget to be professional. Could I introduce you to Dr. Patrick Arbor?
Thank you. And if you could turn on the equipment.
You got it.
While Kathy is getting the projector ready, I wanted to just say how honored and happy I am to participate in this World Elder Abuse Day, and I thank Kathy and her committee for inviting me to participate with you. And I was saying to a couple people, I think it's just really wonderful that we're in this building. In San Andreas, in this building, I think it says out there that was built in 1926. And I think there's just something really very special about being in a structure that has existed for that length of time. And I think it sets a context for you know, the theme of today, which is how do we recognize elder abuse? And you heard Kathy and Elise and others acknowledging the problem of elder abuse. And what I'm going to be talking about today is how do we avoid becoming someone who might be vulnerable to elder abuse. And not just elder abuse, but also to other problems in terms of mental health and physical health. And so that's what I'm going to be talking about today. And as we go along, I'm going to ask you to do a couple things as well for me so that you'll be participating. And if anybody has a burning question or even an ember of a question, just raise your hand and I will be happy to address that. I don't necessarily have to do a monologue. I can also work very well in terms of a dialogue. And what part of my role as a speaker is that what I'm hoping I can do is not just add more information into your already very busy brain because you've heard a lot of information. But what I hope to do is touch you in a deeper place, in your heart, your soul, your spirit, so that we can understand the importance of connecting with others, that we can understand the role of compassion, empathy. I believe that if there was more empathy in the world, there would be far less conflict, because what we would have a sense is, what would it be like to walk in your shoes? Let me see if I could understand that. And I think we would have less elder abuse, less racism, less sexism, less ageism, if we were able to really be aware of what goes on with other people. And that's really going to be part of the theme of my presentation. And then the fourth issue has to do with basic human kindness. I really believe I'm on a lot of national committees in terms of mental health and areas like that. And one of the things that I see nationally is people on these boards saying, we've got to get back to basics. We've got to get back to helping people really be kind. There's a wonderful book by a former dean of Harvard, and it's called Excellence Without Soul. And he's writing about what he saw as the leader in Harvard in terms of curriculum and working and teaching students. And he said, what we've done in these large schools, and what happens in these large schools, Ivy League schools, filters across the country. I also teach, and I've been teaching for 25 years at a liberal arts university called Notre Dame Dana Muir in Belmont, Pennsylvania. And he writes that no matter where you are in the teaching system, whether it's at a university level or a college level or a community college level, what happens at these big schools filters down. And he said, we taught people at Harvard and Yale and these places to be really smart, to know how to make money, to succeed, to move ahead. And he said the thing that we forgot to teach them was how to be good people. And I just am so struck by that as a teacher myself. And I say to my students, again, it's all well and good to have a lot of information up here that we can access, but we also want to tie it, connect it to something deeper in terms of this life experience that we're on together. As Kathy said, I'm the founder and creator of the Center for Elderly Suicide Prevention, and I was very happy to see that a lot of people know the Friendship Line. Yes?
Can you give us the name of that book again?
It's called Excellence Without Soul. Excellence Without Soul. And the 24-hour Friendship Line, as Kathy said, it's an accredited crisis intervention program, but it's also more than that. It's really a place that people can call if they're feeling lonely, if they're feeling isolated, if they're feeling stressed. And And one of the things that I think Friendship Line can do to help support people not only in Calaveras County, but all the counties in California, and we're also national as well, is a safe place for people to call to say, I'm afraid that, as Kathy was saying, that my grandson or my daughter-in-law, whoever, is taking advantage of me. As Elise said, family often don't even know that maybe that matriarch or patriarch is being abused financially because that person doesn't want to say anything because they feel embarrassed and ashamed, humiliated. They just don't want to think that my family member, particularly a family member upon whom I depend, is taking advantage of me. And so getting the word out, talking about it. And that's what I hope happens at the end of the day, is that you just don't go home and say, this was a nice event, and just get back into your normal routine. That I hope you talk about this at your church groups or at other places that you gather, at family gatherings, because it's a family issue in terms of getting the word out. I've got to tell my uncle who lives, in Calaveras County somewhere, and he's 92. It's just so important to be able to say this may happen. And we have to think about that, because these scammers, will ingratiate themselves into the lives of these older individuals, and it looks okay from the outside. But if you get close, what you're going to see is that there's some kind of a problem there if, as Elise or Kathy said, unless that caregiver is really kind, caring, honest, legitimate, maybe bonded, and I think we need to be just more alert, more caring. And so Friendship Line can also be a tool that can also be very helpful with older people in your communities. And we also make a lot of call-outs to people. We have quite a few people that call us from Calaveras County and other counties in this area. And if there's anything I can do, please let me know. And that's our number, the 800-971-0016. And I think Susie is here from our Friends and Neighbors, the periodical that comes out 4 times a year, I guess. And I have an article in there on grief and loss and how that relates to people that have dementia and their caregivers. And the Friendship Line number is there as well. So one of the very important issues that's happening nationally has to do with the growing number of older adults. And the data indicate that each day in the U.S., 10,000 people have been turning 65, and this trend will continue for about another 15 years. Every day, 10,000 people are turning 65. And this is unprecedented in our culture. We have never seen the likes of this before. This is really, we're in pioneering territory in terms of wanting to see how people, as we age, manage our lives and our mental and physical health. The fastest growing age category in America today is 85 plus. And we know that people who are scammers, potential abusers, see this rise in numbers in a way that is going to be very manipulative. And so they're watching those numbers too. They're watching people in our communities too. They're calling chronically on the phone, just as Kathy was saying, to see if I can't catch this older man or older woman in a vulnerable position and act like I'm their best friend, and all you have to do is send me $80,000 because I have a lottery ticket that has your name on it. And so we have to be aware of it. But the other area in terms of growth is that the second largest increase in numbers is the over 100 age category. And again, we don't know how to really assess that individual who's 100 or 101. My daughter-in-law's great-grandmother died about 6 months ago, and she was 105. She would have turned 106 in a couple months. And it was only the last 3 years of her life that she really required constant care. But for 101, 102 years, she lived by herself. Now, she had care, and she has a very active, loving family. But she lived alone for all those years after her husband died, and she didn't want anybody in there. She certainly had a caregiver and family, but she really was fiercely independent. And we're going to know more and more. How many of you know people that are over 100 years of age right now? Raise your hand. And just turn around and look. Because, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, when I would ask that, there might be one hand up, And in 10 or 20 years, there's going to be more than 50% of people are going to say, yeah, it's my mother. It used to be it's our grandparents, but it's going to be our mother because we're all aging. But what we have to do is that we have to think about what keeps us healthy, So it's not so much a matter of how many years that I have. What matters is how well I live those years. And that's really what is so crucial. We want to take care of ourselves. So we want to push back the years of physical, mental decline and increase wellness by identifying practices that keep us healthy, and it's never too soon to think about it. I'm sure many of you have participated in programs about fall prevention. Falls can really change somebody's living situation in a heartbeat. You fall in the bathroom and you hit your head and you have organic brain damage. Or you fall down the stairs and you break a hip, and now life as you knew it has come to a really big halt. And we may never get back, and there's data that indicate that if people fall and have a serious break in the hip, there are data that indicates in 18 months people may die prematurely because there's something so shocking about not just the broken hip, but the broken and fractured lifestyle that might accompany it. The hip might be okay, but there might be some other part of us spiritually that really suffers. So we want to be aware of that. So we want to continue to improve our life. And how can we do that? Well, we want to maintain mental and physical health. Mental and physical health. And the thing that we still have a stigma attached to mental health in this culture. Physical health, yeah, we'll get to the doctor. Even somebody who's pretty isolated will usually have some relationship with a primary care physician. Now, men often wait too long. And I would assume the men in this room wouldn't do that, right? They're like on top of it. But a lot of older men just simply refuse to go to their primary care physician, and what they are manifesting there is fear. They're afraid to go because they're afraid they're going to have a bad diagnosis of something. And so what happens is when they finally are forced to go because they didn't do any preventative approach, they wind up probably having some kind of crisis. And so we have to really, again, communicate. Talk to our older grandparents or fathers, brothers, and sons, and encourage them to think about not just physical health, but mental health. We want to avoid disease and disability. That's why I was talking about falls. I'm 67, I'll be 68 in December, and I have stairs in my house from the upper floor where the bedrooms are downstairs. And I'm very busy, like many of you, and I have a lot of things on my mind. And last week as I was rushing out of the house, I was kind of hurrying down the stairs, and I was thinking about things that could have waited instead of watching where I was putting my feet. which was much more important. And I slipped. Unfortunately, the stairs are carpeted, and I didn't hurt myself. I mean, I did fall, but I was like, it was so important that I said, Patrick, you talk about awareness, you talk about consciousness, and here you are being totally the opposite of that. We all have to think about that. We just have to pay attention because, again, falls can really alter the course of our life, and we want to be aware of that. And we want to continue engagement in life. Engagement. That means participating. That's what I'm so pleased to see so many of you here today because we need to be involved, and be an ambassador for people that you know that for whatever reason couldn't make it here today. And that you can share with them what you learned, pay it forward. I think Kathy used that term earlier. And I think that's the kind of thing we need to do. We need to connect, connect with people in a meaningful way that says, I care about you. I'm sorry you weren't able to make it here. Let me tell you about it. So that if this event happens next year or other events like it happen, that you can get the community to say, let's bring everybody, because we can all benefit from this. The other issue that, again, we haven't seen ever in our culture is the number of people living alone. Which in 2010 nationally was 29 million, which is a 30% increase since 1980. So what we're seeing is there are a lot of us nationally, and I'm sure that reflects in your data in Calaveras County. There are people, because of circumstances that have happened, who are now living alone. And some researchers found that older adults living alone are lonelier than age-matched individuals living with others despite comparable social interaction frequency and personal network adequacy. So even if both of those groups, people that live alone and people that live with others, have the same kind of type of network, social network, the same amount of interaction with people, people who live with others tend to have better quality of life than people who live alone, despite the fact they might have similar interactions with people. So we want to think about that. Dr. Cacioppo, who is the author of this book on loneliness, and he and there are many others now that are exploring loneliness because the reason why people are starting to research is that this is unprecedented. We haven't seen the numbers of people living alone like we're seeing now. So something is shifting in terms of our society. And that doesn't mean to say that people who live alone are all lonely. There might be some of you that live alone. I live alone, and I say thank God. But that's just me. But the thing is that people can live alone because they choose to, And so what we think about there is not loneliness or isolation. What we think about is solitude. Some of you really like your solitude. I was talking to an older woman the other day in the Bay Area, and she lives alone. She's lived alone now for about 8 or 9 years since her husband died. And she said many times, even her family will say, oh, you should be dating, you should meet somebody, you want somebody to live with you, you're so lonely. And she said, this is the happiest time of my life, And she said, my dog and 2 cats are all I need, And that's somebody who enjoys her solitude. So we have to always be very thoughtful when we talk to people and not have an ageist assumption that just because you live alone means that you're suffering from loneliness. What it may be is that I really choose this. I like this. And that's important to be able to discern. Dr. Parasanato is another researcher. She's a geriatric physician from UCSF, and I've done some work with her over the years. And what she says is that if somebody lives alone and is experiencing loneliness and isolation, that they're more likely to experience declines in activities of daily living. That's a problem. You know, and I know you know people, it might be a relative or a neighbor, if you can't do activities of daily living, just writing checks or eating, cleaning, personal hygiene, that sort of thing, making sure you pay your rent or your mortgage or whatever that is, that's a problem, and it can lead to disability. People that live alone and have been hoarding for 40, 50, 60 years. I'm sure nobody in this room is a hoarder or even close to it, right? But that is a significant problem that can interfere with your ability to take care of daily routines. So you want to be alert to that. The other issues that she found in her studies of people who lived alone and are lonely is that they develop difficulties with upper extremity tasks because they're not moving enough. You know, they're not participating in their daily lives because there's a correlation between loneliness and depression. You know, and again, as I said, there's a stigma still in our culture about depression, anxiety. You know, we don't want to talk about that. You know, from the time I started in the field of aging in 1973 until now, it's still happens that if I say to somebody, I wonder if you think that you might be depressed, they say, just as they did in 1973, oh, you think I'm crazy. And it's like, really? We're still there? You know, it's like, we need to think about that. You know, depression is one of the most common mental health issues experienced by older adults. And even when they describe the criteria, the symptomology around depression, you know, such as I'm eating too much or I'm eating too little, you know, changes. I'm not sleeping well, I'm not clear-headed, I'm withdrawn. So they're telling me that I'm depressed. Yet they'll deny it because that word depression still triggers this defensive posture, you know, and we need to think about that. And one of the other issues, and certainly I know this very well over the years, is that depression that is untreated can lead to suicidal ideation, and that can lead to suicidal death. One of the other unfortunate factors is that older people have one of the highest rates of suicide of any age population. So when we're looking at these numbers and we're seeing the 85 plus age category is the fastest growing age category in America today, and we might be thinking, we're sitting there, I'm 67, I'm thinking, wow, I have, you know, maybe 20 more years that I need to kind of pay attention to. There are some people who are saying, why am I still here? You know, I don't feel like I belong. I'm a burden to my family. And that, again, can be repeated in their heads. I don't belong, I don't belong. And they're thinking about death, and they're thinking about leaving. And we need to pay attention to that. We have to be able to communicate, you know, to talk, to, you know, but not just, you know, hey, you know, nice weather or whatever, although I think it's very appropriate that we talk about the Warriors, as somebody mentioned earlier. But the idea is we want to go deeper. We want to have meaningful conversations. What Kathy and Elise were talking about today are very serious topics, you know. Those of you that have ever felt the kind of whiplash of abuse or ageism or sexism or racism know that that's very scary stuff, you know. And what gets in the way of that are connections, you know. Connections. People check with me, check in on me. I call one older woman every day. I've been calling her for years because she lives alone, she's isolated, she is lonely, and she doesn't want to do anything, but my call lifts her spirits. lifts her spirits. And that's what I'm hoping will happen to you today when you leave here, that you're going to feel inspired to connect with some older people in your lives and say, hey, I am here for you. I am here for you. I mean it. And that's going to be so important and strengthen the fabric of your community by being involved. Other things Dr. Parasanocha found is that people that are lonely experience decline in mobility, difficulty climbing, and she found the same thing that Dr. Cacioppo found, is that there is an increased risk of death. Loneliness can contribute to someone dying prematurely. And what I'll probably say a little bit in here too is that loneliness has the same potential for premature death as do other issues, including any kind of risky behavior, which might be drinking too much or smoking too much, or not taking care of yourself. If you have a chronic illness, you don't take your medication properly, that sort of thing. And people are always surprised by that. But we forget that as human beings, we're hardwired to connect. We're hardwired to connect. So when civilization began, humans needed to band together. It was important for survival, as it still is important for survival. And as I was watching people coming in and seeing people that they know, there was a lot of chatter, a lot of connections, a lot of smiles and laughter. There was a lot of noise in here. And I love that, because what it says is there's vibrancy, there's dynamism. People are saying, maybe without using those words, which is, I care about you. You matter. I am glad to see you. There's recognition, that you are worthwhile. You play some role in my life, and I want to recognize that. And that's very crucial for us. I love this quote by Ashley Montague: whether clear or garbled, tumultuous or silent, deliberate or fatally inadvertent, communication is the ground of meeting and the foundation of community. It is, in short, the essential human connection. So when I talk about staying healthy, meaning staying connected, I mean communicating. We've got to talk to one another and share those fears that we might have about a loved one that we know that might be in their 90s and they're not doing very well, or that loved one has COPD or diabetes 2, type 2, and they've been having trouble with monitoring their blood sugar. We need to be able to talk about that and say, I know that life is about impermanence, but I don't like thinking about it. And yet, when do we ever think about it, And not from some depressing place of, oh, why go on because we're going to die anyway. We know what the contract is that we made with God or our higher power when we were born, is that we know that one day we're going to die. And it seems important for us to be able to acknowledge that and to talk about it. What I've noticed is, I don't know if you've heard of these events, they're called death cafes. Well, I'm so into them. It's just pathetic. Because it's an opportunity for people to get together with food, just as you had, because, food is a big draw, You have good food, you can really talk about anything, until they finish and are out the door. But it's an opportunity. People who are living longer, we are realizing that it's important to think about who we are today, at whatever age you are, and I need to keep an eye on the future, if I'm retired, can my retirement fund a 30-year retirement possibility? Do we think, plan, take care of ourselves? That's why the whole issue of financial abuse is terrifying, that not only people outside the family may want to grab your money, but people inside your family might want you to turn over the house, put it in their name. I say to people, as long as you're competent, you keep things in your name. It's your house, it's your money. You keep things, don't let people convince you that you should change that. You change it if you want to, but don't let somebody unduly influence you to put their name on your accounts. That is like, you need to be very thoughtful about that. But we want to be able to communicate. When people talk, listen completely. Most people never listen. Yes?
Do you see a complication coming up here with the younger generation and the social media, internet business? That they consider that communication, but it's not that life-giving communication that the elderly need. But they're the ones that are coming up to be with the elderly.
Right. Yeah, I would just repeat your question because I think it's such an important one in terms of the younger generation and their dependency on social media. Because I often teach traditional age students 18 to 22, and in counseling skills and communication skills, I bring up the topic that you're bringing up in terms of social media. And this one young woman, about 20 years of age, said, I have 750 friends on Facebook. And I said, my God, you should be running for office. I mean, seriously, if I have 3 really good friends, I'm like fortunate. And she has 750. But what we know that you're implying is that we're not really talking about good friends. We say the word friend, but we've sucked the soul out of that word. It's really about acquaintances and who knows what that goes on there. I was just giving a talk about this last week, and someone said, it depresses me to go on Facebook, and this was an older person, because she said, do you think what people are saying about themselves is true? My son and daughter-in-law put me on Facebook because I just said, Facebook, I don't know. I just didn't have the wherewithal to figure out even how to get on there. But I like seeing my family's pictures by my brothers back east. But there's like a theme there that it's like everybody has a much better life than I do. And so I said, no, I don't think I'm interested in Facebook. But as you're implying, it's really important that we have this, that we see people or we hear people's real voice, that we have this energy that I was referring to earlier. There was so much energy when people were talking and laughing and connecting, and that's really missing. I think there's nothing wrong with social media. I think it's perception that it is our primary way of connection is what I think is a concern. Not to be on Facebook or whatever, but if that's our only form of connection, we're going to be in poverty in terms of real communication. And I'll talk about a study that was done by people at Yale about Facebook and ageism in just a bit. So we want to think about communication and connections. Mary Pfeiffer, a therapist and author, The Shelter of Each Other is just a terrific book. When Kathy asked me to do this talk, and she said, we really want to think about community and we want to think about connections as a way to at least have other options when it comes to preventing abuse or preventing, disability. And I thought immediately of Mary Pfeiffer because The Shelter of Each Other is a fabulous book, and I urge you all to get it if you're interested. And she said, relationships are not disposable. If you've got a great aunt that is sitting, in Valley Springs, is that right? Did I come through there? Yeah, probably. It looks like such a nice community. But if Aunt Mary is just sitting there by herself, or Uncle John gets up in the morning and just turns on the TV and sits there with the TV on, doesn't communicate, doesn't talk, we've got a problem, and then we kind of forget about them, and that's where we do ourselves and them an injustice, is that we want to really keep those connections alive. And if Uncle John is just sitting there watching daytime TV, he's going to be very passive, very down, and probably depressed. And so anticipate when you talk to him in a real way. One woman said to me after her husband died, she was living in a community, senior community, and I said something to her about, having meaningful conversations. And she said, I haven't had a meaningful conversation since my husband died 15 years ago. And I said, what do you think accounts for that? And she said, the number one issue in this senior community is gossip. So she said, I'm not going to talk to people about what I really feel or believe, because this is gossip central, and so we talk about safe topics, food, weather, the Kardashians, and we sidestep anything real. And so it made me think when we were talking about the role of senior peer counselors, is that I know that they talk about meaningful things, and I know it's not always easy, because we're conditioned to avoid the very topics that are going to help us grow and give us some sense of, I am alive. I am alive. We've got to acknowledge that inside of ourselves. I am alive today, and can today be meaningful? And it will be more meaningful if I talk to people in a real way. That I take a little teeny tiny bit of a risk and say, I sometimes think about whatever, what's going to happen to me down the road, and to be able to have that type of conversation, it's really okay. And we want to be able to think about that. What Mary Piper says, we often live only in our heads. And so we have this dialogue up here that says, I've been worried about my breathing. And even though I have a wife and 3 adult children, I'm not telling them. And then I justify it by saying, well, I don't want to worry them. I rationalize it by saying, well, I am getting a little old. Rather than saying what you're probably really saying up here in your head is, I'm a little afraid about this. And I don't know what to do, And we need to be able to talk, and just tell that to somebody. We'll be estranged from ourselves and others if we only live an intellectual life. Robert Butler, who was the person that coined ageism, said it's not death that he believed was at stake with us as we age. He said, I think we all kind of have a sense of needing to turn over, our cities and counties and communities to the younger generation. There's something about that we kind of know. But he said what he thinks really terrifies people is the fact that they have lived an absurd life, a life without meaning, and we need to shift that, particularly because there are going to be so many more of us who are going down the age continuum. And we don't want people to go down there into their 80s or 90s fearful, because that's going to be a breeding ground for vulnerability and possibly abuse. We can strengthen our connections through communicating and listening to one another. And so we want to really respect both parts of that communication, which is not only the speaking, but also the listening. And I know you know this, and you're on the phone and you're talking to somebody on the phone and you're looking at what the soup is doing and you're kind of looking at your watch because this person is just droning on and they're not really saying anything. There's no content. There's lots and lots of words, but no content. And you're just kind of drifting rather than saying, what would you really like to talk about? What is it that's really on your mind? And I'd be willing to talk. But what we often do is that we act like we're listening, when we're really not. And I see this so much, and we've got to change that. We've got to do something about it. And that means we've got to see the value in really positive, meaningful conversation. So what I'm going to ask of you to do, because I don't want you just sitting there, I want you to do, we're going to do a little exercise, and it's going to be very simple. But what I want you to do is talk to somebody that you don't know. And that might mean you're going to have to get up, and you're going to have to look around and see somebody that you do not know, and I'm going to ask you to go up to them and introduce yourself. And we have to be able to do this. If we're going to help lonely people do it, can you imagine somebody really lonely and isolated for 10 or 15 years, and we say to them, hey, go to the senior center or go to this group activity of older adults. They're going to be terrified, But we have to see, how do I do? Even me asking you to do this, even though we haven't done it yet, some of you might be saying, maybe the introverts in you, might be saying, oh, God, I'm all content here. I have my friends on either side of me, and he wants me to introduce myself to somebody else. Why? Because we need the practice. So that you can go up, as Kathy was saying, to that neighbor out here that, you know that she's in there and you haven't seen her in a while, but you didn't know her that well. I want you to go over and knock on her door and say, hello, I'm your neighbor. I've lived here for 20 years. How are you? So for just about 5 or 6 minutes, and I want you to acknowledge how you would define loneliness. How would you define loneliness? And so you're going to say, hello, my name is Patrick, what's yours? And you're going to say Linda, whoever. And then say, Patrick asked us to talk about loneliness. How would you define loneliness? And I'll tell you how I define it. All right, we know what we're going to do. And just pay attention to energy. Here you've been sitting quietly, and now we want to see what's changing now. So are you ready? Go. And you can move around.
So I'm going to give you a 5-minute sign. I've got 5 minutes left. We're going to shoot for 2. But if that goes 5 over, that's fine. Just give me the 5. Sounds good. Okay, I'll give you the 5 minutes.
Oh yeah, no, that was what I was thinking.
Okay.
Let's do another.
To get them back, set back down, okay?
Give them 5 minutes.
Okay, you got a timer?
Yeah. And then we're going to go and do another one. Yeah, I love that idea.
It's nice just to get them, they get excited. Oh, now where'd I leave off at?
Is this one next?
The brown bag, I think, gardening set, Jogs for Progress, that one right there, yes. And then Starbucks, and then the black purse, so that should be, yep. Okay. I must have had 5 pence.
Here's one here.
By the way, you're doing a great job. You got everybody intent. One lady back there says, I love this. I'm like, yay! Okay. Do those. Do you need another water? You good? Okay.
yeah, no, I agree. Thanks. Okay, if I could have your attention again. If you'd take your seats again, thank you. Kathy's going to do another drawing because you've been so willing to participate. I am, thank you. I appreciate that. Angie, I'm Patrick.
Alrighty. I was gonna thank someone else and I forgot. Oh well, anyway.
We're talking about Robin.
Oh yeah, Robin. Oh yeah, by the way, Robin, where are you, Robin? Here's Robin, here's our secretary for the Commission on Aging this year. I won't tell you where she was hiding, but you can probably all guess. Couple other commissioners that came in later. Elizabeth Thompson, right here. Raise your hand, Elizabeth. George, right there. Bertha down there at the end. I got Lori. I think I got everybody. If I didn't get a commissioner, can you raise your hand? I guess I got them all. Okay. Alrighty, so Patrick asked me to do a couple... Oh, Susan. Sorry, Susan. By the way, Susan is taping this to go on the local channel. So if you've got friends or neighbors or something, we want to thank you for that, Susan. Where did Kim go? Cliff. Okay, so this next door prize is from SIRS Jobs for Progress. And Judy Hospital is here with us, and she gave us this wonderful gardening kit. I was going to have you pass that to the person that won it.
Okay.
And that number, does everybody have a ticket? Yes. Anybody need a ticket? Okay, so this next number is 423. 423. And you must be present to win. So Susie, check your ticket. 423. 423 going once. 423 going twice. Okay, some lucky winner is going to win this one because that other one left. Okay, this number is 403. All right. Right here. And our next prize is a Starbucks gift certificate. Compliments of the Commission on Aging. And those numbers are 415. Oh. You found somebody? Yep. 415. Okay. Oh, there we go. This next one is a purse that's been donated that is stuffed. Now, I can't promise what's stuffed in it, but I don't think there's any money in it or I would have found it. And this again was donated by the Commission on Aging. And this is number 398. Yes! Come on up, Steve. Come on up, Steve. Just think, Steve, your wife's got a birthday present. Okay, we have another crocheted purse, which is beautiful, and it is also stuffed with stuff. And this is also donated by a commissioner on aging. And that number is, let's see if I can pick the father over there, 424. Oh, okay. Okay, and the last one before our break would be a gift certificate, I'm going to say to a wonderful restaurant in Calaveras County, because I can't say it's the best, but I can say it's wonderful, okay? It's from Country Cliffs here in San Andreas. And that number is 426. Oh, there we go, right there.
Thank you for your dedicated service. We really appreciate it.
Coming apart here, so. Okay.
Thank you. And what you were all demonstrating there when Kathy was calling out numbers was focused listening.
Oh, they forgot to take your plaque.
That
Elisa,
was really,
would you come back up here with me a minute,
important.
Dana?
And
did you want to make a presentation?
Again, as you did that exercise, just in terms of saying hello.
Elisa, I want you to know
somebody
that
you
Adult
didn't know,
Protective Services
and
is
maybe
not only being
briefly
recognized at the
acknowledging how
county
you look at
level, but also at
loneliness
the
and how
state
they
level.
might.
So Dana
Did
is
you
here to
find
do
that
that.
difficult and challenging? No. You know, you know,
Dana, I'm with
what's so
Senator
important
Berryhill
is
and
that,
Assemblyman Bigelow,
you know,
and we have
listening
a
is
legislative
really
resolution
this
for you as well.
magnificent art.
Let me just read this
you know?
quickly.
You know, when you
help me
feel
along with
listened
things?
to, when you feel that somebody
This is a
is
certificate of
really
recognition to the Calaveras
attending
County
to
Adult
you,
Protective Services
that
Agency.
you feel
and it
just
says we honor your
very
contributions
kind of
towards keeping our
welcomed,
seniors safe
you know,
and
into
healthy.
an interaction.
Your service towards
You know,
helping our friends and
when
neighbors
somebody
continue to
speaks,
live and be an
somebody
integral
has
part
to
of
listen.
Calaveras County
But we've
is
not
honored and
grown very
appreciated.
good at
It
it
is
because we
signed
don't
by my
practice it a
bosses,
whole lot.
Senator
And we
Berryhill
just need to
Assemblyman Bigelow.
practice it more. And I urge you again with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your consumers or clients, that you practice listening. And all that means is, let me give you the gift
I just wanted
of
to
my
add real
attention.
quick.
You know, and it is a gift.
I think
because
that's
so
something
many
that,
people
I
don't
think
offer
you said
that.
today, if the
and
banks
so we
can't
want to
get
be
involved, I
really,
know
really
people-
able to
people,
say,
you know, you keep
when I'm
accounting of
talking
your
or when I'm
finances,
listening
we're
to
all
you,
different.
I'm
And
really
your
listening.
banker
I'm
knows
not
how you
thinking
do
about
that.
what I'm going to
If
have for
something's out
dinner
of order,
or what I need to
they
do
know
next.
that, and
I'm
there's
just
someone
gonna
that can
be
step in and
present.
say, hey, how are you
Present.
doing?
It's so
and people
crucial.
are willing to,
and
they have that bond and that trust,
you know,
even if it's
researchers
in the bank
state that
once a
few
week
people
or
are good
whenever.
listeners. About 75%
So I would
of oral
encourage the banks
communication
because
is ignored, misunderstood,
unfortunately,
or quickly
we have
forgotten.
a lot
You know,
of
we've grown
younger people
very
that take
lax
advantage of older
when it
folks,
comes to
and it's really sad to
paying
see, and
attention.
we wanna do
you know,
everything
many
we
of you
can do
that
to
have
prevent
children
that,
might have
so
said that your
thank you.
daughter or son, when they were in kindergarten, whatever, had a really hard time paying attention.
have a
and now we
question
even
for
have
you.
a diagnostic category.
Are you a firstborn
called,
grandson?
You know, this attention deficit syndrome or disorder. And I think what we just have to figure out is maybe we need to, as families,
I'm the oldest
communicate
great-grandchild.
more, rather than everybody on their iPhones.
yeah.
I mean, and nowadays you hear of people where the 13-year-old is
And I'll tell
upstairs
you
in
what,
their room,
somebody,
and he or she texts
My dad,
the parents
not toot my horn.
who are
My
in the
dad's, you know,
living
I'm
room.
really proud of both
You
my
know,
kids. They both left home
no
at 18.
way.
They've taken care
You
of
know,
themselves
are we
for
going
years
to
and years.
promote healthy communication
more people did that.
by texting one another
Thank you,
in
Dana.
our own
Yes, sir.
homes? You know, there's something terribly, terribly
All right.
wrong that we need to think
Again,
about.
it knows no economic
We don't want
boundaries,
speakers'
so-
words to go
Okay,
in
who's
one
hungry?
ear and out the other. The world suffers a lot,
If you
not
raised your
because
hand,
of
you
the
get to go in
violence
line
of bad
first.
people,
No, I'm kidding.
but because of the
So what we're going to
silence
do
of
next
good
is we're going to
people.
break about 15 minutes for
and
lunch.
What I mean by
and what
that
we'd like
is,
you to do is come get
as
your lunch,
Kathy
come
said,
right back
you
to the
know,
table. Because
didn't know, and maybe briefly acknowledging how you look at loneliness and how they might. Did you find that difficult and challenging? No. You know, you know, what's so important is that, you know, listening is really this magnificent art, you know? You know, when you feel listened to, when you feel that somebody is really attending to you, that you feel just very kind of welcomed, you know, into an interaction. You know, when somebody speaks, somebody has to listen. But we've not grown very good at it because we don't practice it a whole lot. And we just need to practice it more. And I urge you, again, with your family, with your friends, with your colleagues, with your consumers or clients, that you practice listening. And all that means is, let me give you the gift of my attention. You know, and it is a gift because so many people don't offer that. And so we want to be really, really able to say, when I'm talking or when I'm listening to you, I'm really listening. I'm not thinking about what I'm going to have for dinner or what I need to do next. I'm just going to be present. It's so crucial. You know, researchers state that few people are good listeners. About 75% of oral communication is ignored, misunderstood, or quickly forgotten. You know, we've grown very lax when it comes to paying attention. You know, many of you that have children might have said that your daughter or son, when they were in kindergarten, whatever, had a really hard time paying attention. And now we even have a diagnostic category called, this attention deficit syndrome or disorder. And I think what we just have to figure out is maybe we need to, as families, communicate more, rather than everybody on their iPhones. I mean, and nowadays you hear of people where the 13-year-old is upstairs in their room and he or she texts the parents who are in the living room. You know, no way. You know, are we going to promote healthy communication by texting one another in our own homes? You know, there's something terribly, terribly wrong that we need to think about. We don't want speakers' words to go in one ear and out the other. The world suffers a lot, not because of the violence of bad people, but because of the silence of good people. And what I mean by that is, you know, as Kathy said, you know, I haven't seen my neighbor or this person who lives on my road maybe for months, and I know they're kind of up there in years. What prevents me from stopping and just checking? You know, I'm used to seeing you outside your house or, you know, cutting the grass or whatever, and I haven't seen you in a while. You know, it's about noticing, you know, being part of a community and not thinking that, oh, that person is disposable. I don't have to think about them. Paul Irving said, in terms of what we can do in terms of self-powerment, is that the first step to take towards self-powerment is to recognize the prevalence of ageism. You know, ageism, like sexism and racism, homophobia, has not gone underground. You know, it's sadly being practiced all across this country, where people who are older don't feel safe going out, particularly in the evening. And we need to take our communities back. You know, what we're going to see, as I said earlier, we've never seen the likes of how many older people are going to be in our communities, in our towns and cities. But if we all hide, nobody's going to realize that there are many, many of us. And we know with numbers, there's a lot of potential for safety, but also for power. And so I want us to just think about that. And if you've been a victim of ageism, and Robert Butler, as I said, coined the term ageism back in 1969 in his book, Why Survive? Growing Old in America, which is still the only book on aging that has ever won the Pulitzer Prize. And if you are looking for a book about how challenging it is to grow old in this country, that would be the book I would recommend. Why Survive? Growing Old in America. And Robert Butler said it's a process that reflects a deep-seated uneasiness on the part of the young and middle-aged, a personal revulsion to and distaste for growing old, disease, and disability, and fear of powerlessness, uselessness, and death. Ageism is a set of beliefs relating to the aging process. And we've got to do something about that. And only a paradigm shift is going to be able to change that, which means that we who are in our 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s need to believe that every age has its contribution to make. Every age is a valuable experience for that individual, and there is such potential for helping others. But we've got to be able to create communities that welcome us, and not say, oh, you know, we really wanted this to be for young people, or, you know, people in their 20s or 30s, and look at these old people coming to this dance. You know, as long as we can move, we can dance. And we have just as much right as anybody to participate in community activities. And we can change this. Ageism promotes the idea that older people are a burden, and this can lead to neglect and social isolation. And so when Kathy was defining self-neglect, you know, this is how it happens. You know, many people will say to me in their 70s and 80s, they had no idea of the concept of ageism when they were growing up, because, you know, they either valued their older parents or grandparents, they weren't inoculated with ageist attitudes, but now what they say is, I just never thought about it until somebody at a grocery store yelled at me when I was pulling in to take a space. This one woman said to me, I had been waiting for this space at the Safeway, and it came open, and she had been waiting, and she saw another car, but that she had been first, and she pulled into the slot, and as she got out of her car, these young couple in their probably, she said about 30, looked at her and said, "You old hag, you took my space. Why don't you do your shopping early in the morning rather than at 5 in the afternoon?" Well, she works. I mean, she was working, and she was just stopping at the store on her way home. And she said that frightened her so much. She got back in her car. She went home. She called her stylist, her hairstylist, and said, I want an emergency appointment because I have to dye my hair brown because she had let it go gray. And she said, and she trembled. She said, I have never, ever felt that way in my life, that I would be called an old hag. And that happens, you know? And if it happened to anybody in this room, I want to empathize, because when it happened to me, it was extraordinarily disturbing. And the assumptions that it was a group of young people had made about me was just astounding. And they were saying that I'm taking advantage of the system. I mean, I work like many of you do. And I'm like, what? But they frightened me because they were getting so agitated. And we have to really, really pay attention. And we don't have to change our appearance through Botox or whatever. And I'm all for people wanting to look the way they want to look. But if we do it like this friend of mine did, because she said, I have to do everything I can to look young. You know, we're impoverishing the meaning of growing older in our society. And that's a problem, and we've got to be able to think about it. Ageism has been described as prejudice against one's future self. And so self-neglect, you know, again, it's a behavior of an elderly person that threatens his or her own health and safety. You know, if somebody doesn't feel safe in their community, they don't feel comfortable going out, or because of some vision problem or other type of problem, they're not able to drive the car anymore. That's a major grief experience in a person's life. And generally, we don't have rituals for people like that, so that they could, you know, try to find a way to work through that. Because losing your driver's license, particularly I would think in more rural areas, is a real problem. I even see that in the San Francisco Bay Area, because even though we have more transportation options, it's not exactly, if you've been in San Francisco and have ridden the Muni bus line, I mean, you have to really be armored, it's like combat ready to get on the Muni bus. But we need to think about it. And it's a public health challenge, to manage people that self-neglect. It's certainly a challenge for Adult Protective Services. How do I help support this person? What can I do? Well, one of the issues is generally people who self-neglect are not communicating, not connecting, and we want to help them. A key ethical issue concerns decision-making regarding personal need, health, and safety. We have to get to know people in our communities. Risk factors for self-neglect: advanced age, social isolation, poor social support, chronic medical conditions, acute hospitalizations or emergency room visits, and malnutrition or dehydration. Dementia, depression, diabetes, and on and on. So one of these risk factors might just tip the scales in terms of somebody slipping into isolation, loneliness, or depression. And we just don't want that to happen. And we've got to do everything we can to support older members in our community. And we also want to be aware of cultural diversity. So if there are segments of your population here in Calaveras County that identify as African American or Asian American or Hispanic, what we want to be aware too is, how do they view aging? Do they have unique approaches to it? How do they handle concerns about memory loss or cognitive deficits? So we want to communicate, talk to. The role that cultural diversity plays in the definition, assessment, and intervention in elderly maltreatment has been given very little attention. And so we want to make sure that we have connections with all of our community members, not just certain segments of the community. But ignoring this dimension renders research misleading and treatment ineffective. So we want to just always strengthen our understanding through what I call cultural humility, meaning I don't know what it might be like for you if you move to this country from somewhere else. Because one of the things that we see in the Bay Area is this concept called psychological homelessness. When people have left maybe their own countries, and due to whatever reasons, maybe poverty or maybe political uprisings, and they move to another location, they might suffer from psychological homelessness, that they just don't feel rooted in the community. And we want to do all we can to help support people fit in to our community and our culture. And this was the Facebook study that I was mentioning. In 2014, Yale researchers published this study, and it's published in the Gerontologist. And what they looked at, they analyzed Facebook groups that had descriptions about individual age 60 years of age and older. A mean age of these groups was 20 to 29, and no one was older than 59 in these groups on Facebook that the researchers were analyzing. And by doing this, what they saw were the following results. And I think they had something like 80 groups of individuals, and in these groups there were many of them, and many participants in these different groups, but nobody was over the age of 59, and the mean was 20 to 29. And 74% of the total descriptions harshly criticized older people, and many of them, the researchers said, looked like this: that older people do not contribute to modern society at all. 41% of the descriptions refer to physical debilitation, 27% to cognitive debilitation, and 13% to both forms. An example, again, of the descriptions that these individuals were making about older people was, I hate everything about them, meaning everything about old people, from their hairnets in the rain to their white Velcro sneakers. They are cheap, they smell like fill in the blank, they are senile. 37% of the descriptions advocated banning older people from public activities. 26% of the descriptions infantilized older people, calling them children, they act like children, that kind of thing. And this was published in 2014 in the Gerontologist. And so, what's happening out there might be different than what you might be experiencing in your own family. And yet a lot of people are really targets of ageist attitudes. And we need to really think about that as we go forward, if we're going to make a dent in the high numbers that you were hearing of elder abuse cases. People need to believe and feel safe, particularly as we age. It's just critical for a community to know that. We also know that those of you who are working and aging as we work, approximately 2/3 of workers ages 45 to 74 state that they have seen or experienced age discrimination in the workplace. Of those, a remarkable 92% state that age discrimination is very or somewhat common. And one of the areas that older people were often criticized about has to do with brain health. And so I know this throughout the country when I give talks in various states across the country, when I ask healthy older people what is it that they fear most, and they fear that they're going to lose their mind, or they believe some of the mythology out there about our brain in terms of brain health. And I'm not going to go into detail about this, but empowerment begins with education, and that the brain's processing speed, it might slow down. I often say when I'm giving talks, and I'll be trying to think of a name of an author of a book or something, and somebody in the audience will say, oh, you mean Robert Butler? And I'm like, thank you. I so appreciate that. Because it's not politically correct. What you usually do, the information out there is like, let that older person search for that themselves. Well, I might not come up with Robert Butler's name until 3 o'clock this morning, and I don't think we have enough time to wait for that. And if somebody knows what I'm trying to say, I say thank you. I call it collaboration. And I very much welcome that. But what we want to see is that, the retrieval process slows down. I have the information up there, and that feeling of I just can't, it's on the tip of my tongue and I just can't get it. And then you get it like 3 hours later. But that's just normal, wear and tear. That's just, what happens in terms of all that data that we are bombarded with. 50 years ago, there was so much less. 100 years ago, there was so much less information that was coming at you. You read the print media. That's, I love when Susie said about, friends and neighbors. Some people still read. I think that's like a hallelujah on that one. But your brain never stops growing. The older brain maintains its capacity to change its structure according to learning or exercise demands. So that's what I mean by meaningful conversations. Talk about things that are maybe a little more complicated, because your brain is going to like that. When they do imaging on the brain, what they see when people are engaged in meaningful conversations, much more of the brain lights up. And so, there's that use it or lose it kind of cliche that we've often heard. Well, it's very true with the brain. The more we exercise it, the more it's going to remain healthy. But sitting there passively watching the TV isn't going to be helpful to the brain. We need to have more interactions. But your brain doesn't stop working, doesn't stop growing. unless there's an organic brain issue. And certainly we all know that it's called dementia and has to do with plaques and tangles. And still today there is no cure, but I saw in the paper, and you probably saw this maybe last week or the week before, that there was some new scientific discoveries that might be helpful, but we've heard this like every 5 years. It just seems like you hear that, oh, there's this potential for a new drug that's going to be very helpful in terms of maybe unlocking the mystery behind these plaques and tangles, and then it doesn't work. But I think we have to remain hopeful, because right now there's no cure for that disease. And then when you hear the 85 plus age category is the fastest growing age category in America, and that age is the #1 risk factor for cognitive impairment and the dementias, that should really give us pause, that we really want to make sure our brains are functioning as healthy as they possibly can. Language skills improve. Our reasoning and problem-solving skills get sharper. And so when somebody says to you, oh, I just can't think anymore, I make bad decisions, that might not have to do with their brain, that might have to do with depression. And it's that depressed older person that is much more likely to be abused than an older person who is, thinking, reasoning, being aware of what's going on in the community. And that's where you all come in to remind them about the risk factors when it comes to abuse or self-neglect. Our social intelligence keeps expanding, which is really good. This one is really important. Emotional well-being maintains or improves with age. Emotional well-being maintains or improves with age. We are less ruffled by the ups and downs that go on with our families. When my son, who's 35, and he's having all these issues or whatever, and I'm like, oh, okay. I mean, I'm listening, but I'm not leaping in there, And I say, if you would like my advice, I'll offer it. But I'm not going to give it to you unless you want it. And now at 35, I'm so grateful, he says, I'd like to hear what you have to say. At 20, forget it. So we are much more alert and prepared for emotional issues as we get older, and that's very important. We learn from our experiences. This is what Erik Erikson refers to as wisdom. And we have to remind people who are lonely or isolated when they say, what's the point? It's like, wisdom is the point. You have something to offer. What is your purpose in life? How can you participate? It's not just about getting something, it's also about giving something. Can you, as even here, can you volunteer and help support an activity if you're able to get out? And if you're not able, you're in a wheelchair, somebody will come and get you. Participate is very important. It's a combination of lack of physical activity and poor diet, which is the second highest underlying cause of death in the United States. We need to think about that. Nearly 1/2 of adults ages 55 and older engage in at least some form of light, moderate, or vigorous leisure time activity. This physician that I was referring to in a talk, an older person had raised their hand and said to her, if you had to give one piece of advice in terms of how do we stay healthy, how do we avoid being victims of abuse, she said the word is activity. Just like all of you came to this, and I so congratulate you, it's about participating and being active. And that's very crucial. Again, exercise doesn't have to be going to the gym and working yourself into a lather. Walking, 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, even walking 30 minutes 3 or 4 times a week can be very healthy for your heart, for your lungs, and we need to be alert to that. be aware again of relationships. Social relationships have as much impact on physical health as blood pressure, smoking, physical activity, and obesity. Researchers found a 50% increase in survival of people with robust social relationships, regardless of age or gender. So it's about continuing your involvement in life and not abdicating it. I only have a couple minutes left, but I want to just really emphasize the power of the link between social relationships and health is hard to overstate. And there is empirical research that emphasizes that people that have, again, strong social support, people that they are accountable to, people they tell the truth to. What are the three most important elements of a relationship? It doesn't matter what that relationship is, whether it's friend or family member, is respect, respecting people, not attacking them, not yelling at them, respecting them. The second are good boundaries, having healthy boundaries, that people understand what my boundaries are, and I want to know what yours are. But the element that is the most important, and there are probably others, but the element that we cannot do without is honesty. We have to learn to tell the truth. What Mary Pfeiffer says is that in conversations, like maybe several paragraphs long, what she says is that even though there's no need to distort, people will tell distortions in a paragraph or two, and they just get used to kind of making things up. It's like, whoa, that is not healthy. When the truth would work just as well, we want to embellish or make ourselves look more important in a desperate attempt to get attention. We don't need to make things up. We can just be ourselves and tell our truth, tell our story, and that needs to be listened to. You don't have to make it into something grand. But this power of social relationships is almost ignored in the healthcare delivery system, that we just don't pay attention to that. So what do we need to do? Well, we need to bring people together, just as Kathy and her team and the different organizations that participated in this brought you all together to talk about something very serious, but also to have some fun along the way, to have door prizes, to have a nice lunch. That's really important. Talk together and share experiences to understand one another more deeply. Create community conversations, courageous conversations among older adults, caregivers, friends, family, about our visions of care in the future. So these are things that we want to be aware of. I just want to end this time, and I again value the time that I am here with you. And if anybody has a question then before we do the rest of the door prizes, Mary Pfeiffer in her book Another Country, and this is her book about working with older adults and their families, and she writes, what we need to do, is to learn from the old and to learn that we must love them. And not just in the abstract, but in the flesh. Beside us in our homes, beside us in our businesses, in our churches, and in our schools. We want the generations mixed together so that the young can give the old joy and the old can give the young wisdom. As we get older, we sense more the importance of connecting old to young, family member to family member, neighbor to neighbor, and even the living to the dead. In connection, there is a level of truth, a level of beauty, and ultimately, it leads to our salvation. Connection is what makes life bearable for us humans. Thank you.